Good afternoon. This is the 18th of February 2013. I'm Dr. Jack Herlin, a volunteer and docent at the Palm Springs Air Museum in Southern California. Part of our mission is to record and preserve the history of our country's military conflicts, especially World War II. As part of the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in those conflicts. Today I'm on location at the Covenant Village of Colorado in Westminster, Colorado. And today I have the honor and privilege of interviewing Chaplain Colonel George E. Meister. Colonel Meister spent 26 years in the United States Air Force Reserve, serving as chaplain at the USAF Academy in Colorado, at numerous Air Force bases, as well as Norad, US Northcom, US Stratcom, US CENTCOM, and United States Air Force Space Command. In 2010 and 11, he deployed as wing chaplain to the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing, Joint Base Balad, Iraq. So we'll be talking to him about this and several other areas of interest. It's indeed a privilege and a pleasure to have you with me this afternoon, Colonel. Thank you. And now we'll be right back with Colonel George Meister. Colonel Meister, would you please spell and pronounce your full name?
My name is George Edward Meister, spelled G-E-O-R-G-E. Edward is E-D-W-A-R-D. Last name Meister, M-E-I-S-T-E-R.
And where and when were you born?
I was born January 9, 1952 in Denver, Colorado at St. Joseph's Hospital.
And where did you live?
Originally in North Denver, 3280 or 4250 Green Court, in just off 38th and Federal in Denver. Then in 1955, family moved to Wheat Ridge at 9800 West 35th Avenue.
This was just neighborhoods, residential?
Residential neighborhoods, correct.
What was your father's name?
My name, his name was same as mine, George Edward Meister, but he went by Junior because I actually am the fourth George. My dad was the third, his dad was second, and so he went by Junior. But I dropped the fourth later in my life. And
What about your father? Where was he born?
He was also born in Denver, a Denver native, along with my mom. And my dad grew up again in North Denver, graduated from North High School, 1932.
Where did the Meister family come from?
Originally, going back 400 or 500 years, it was Bavaria, Germany, around Speyer, Germany. And then they immigrated early 1800s to the area around southern Illinois. And then my grandfather came to Denver early 1900s and worked for the Santa Fe Railroad.
Do you know why they left Europe?
I really don't know that on my dad's side.
How about your mother? What is her name?
Her name was Ethel Genevieve. Maiden name was Peterson, and her parents came from around Göteborg, Sweden.
Yes. And where was she born?
My mom was also born in Denver, and 1916.
So her
in
parents
Denver.
had immigrated.
That's correct, and they settled also around. It was. Down close to North Denver, down to the Globeville area of Denver.
Have you and or your wife had the opportunity to go back to either Germany or Sweden?
Had the opportunity to go back to Sweden a number of years ago when I was in high school. Visited a lot of our distant cousins still living back there, and we still keep up with them somewhat.
Do you have any siblings?
Yes, I have my older sister, Joan Meister, and my younger brother, Spencer Meister, and we all live here in the Denver area.
Nice. Who's the older?
I'm the middle, and my sister is the oldest, and brothers, of
What
course,
is
are
your
younger.
sister's name?
Her name is Joan Meister Bridges.
And your brother's name?
Is Spencer Meister.
So he lost the George.
Yeah, that's correct.
What type of a neighborhood was it? Predominantly Scandinavian, German? Was there ethnicity to it?
Where I grew up, primarily in the Wheat Ridge neighborhood, that was a mix. There were just a lot of different, we were middle class, just pretty much run-of-the-mill neighborhood as Denver began to expand west from Sheridan Boulevard, and there were some newer homes. It was mostly in a kind of a rural agrarian area, and a few homes started to pop up, and my dad felt it'd be a good place to raise us kids.
Your sister and brothers were how much older or younger than you?
My sister is 5 years older, and my brother is 3 years younger.
When you were a youngster then, who were your playmates?
Besides my sister and brother, I don't know, we all got along and played together, whatever it might be, whether it be in the house, the games and whatnot, or out in the backyard. We had a large backyard and played sports with the neighbor kids, and there's quite a few other younger families, same age kids. We'd ride our bikes and
What kind of games were you playing?
Oh, we would actually, some of my earliest recollections, we'd play Army, we'd play War, so we'd watch some of the reruns of some of the movies on television, some of the ones that were made shortly after World War II, and my brother and I aspired to want to follow in my dad's footsteps, to be a soldier and join the Army someday, and so we wanted to be well prepared for that.
Your father had been in service.
Yes, he served 3 years in the Army, Army Engineer Battalion, stationed primarily in Iceland, Germany, or Iceland during the war.
Second war.
Yeah, Second World War, correct.
And he was encouraging military careers?
It was just an assumption back in those days, as the draft was still in place, and that someday both my brother and I would be drafted and be soldiers, and so that it was common around the household to hear my dad say, well, someday when you get in the Army, you won't have the luxury of enjoying whatever food you wanted to eat. You ate what's served to you. You wouldn't get to sleep in on Saturdays. You'd always have to be doing your chores and be in good physical condition. So it was just an assumption that we would someday serve in the military.
Where'd you go to grammar school?
Went to, it was a little elementary school called Prospect Valley, down off 38th and Kipling. And then Color Strand Elementary School had expanded a little bit further west on 38th.
Could you walk from home?
It was a long walk, and oftentimes we'd be able to talk my mom into letting us walk, but usually she would drive. We had an old 52 Chevrolet, and I still remember piling in the back seat and going down.
What kind of work did your father do?
My dad was, after the war, he had worked a number of different jobs prior to going into the military. Butcher, truck driver, worked a number of different jobs, but he was a tremendous artist with drafting instruments, and he was a draftsman by trade. Worked at the Federal Center in the topographical mapping section, and then after the war, he bought a small little mapping company called Hotchkiss, and so growing up, that was just a big part of our life, just a small little business, had a few employees, but he made maps primarily.
Did your mother work outside of the home?
You know, she was primarily a stay-at-home mom, but she would keep the books for my dad and do the payroll and assist in any way that she could. Oftentimes, my dad would make brochures and booklets and pamphlets with the maps. He'd bring all that work home, and we'd all gather around a large dining room table and collate and put things together. So my mom was a big part of the small business.
Did you like school?
I liked school. I can't say I was a great student, but I probably learned more practical things than I did some of the rote learning. And you know, just being with friends and just enjoying life as a young kid growing up.
What kind of religious upbringing did you have in the family?
Born and raised in the Lutheran Church, come out of the old Augustana Synod. My grandparents, who immigrated from Sweden, were some of the early members of Augustana Lutheran Church down what is now known as Five Points, a big old church. And I remember going there as some of the services were still conducted in Swedish, in the Swedish language. And then they built another church out in Aurora, and so we would every week be faithful attenders. Was baptized, confirmed, and ordained in the Lutheran Church, Augustana Lutheran, here in Denver.
Well, let's get on with your high school. What high school did you attend?
Attended Wheat Ridge High School there in Wheat Ridge. We were Wheat Ridge Farmers, was our mascot.
Oh.
And so lived close to school, walked there every day.
What activities were you involved?
Participated in mostly the sports, football, basketball, and a little bit of baseball.
Did you play varsity sports then?
I did junior varsity. Didn't aspire to the level of varsity, but senior year worked pretty much full-time, different part-time jobs, worked in my dad's printing mapping shop, and also worked for a trucking company, and I was pretty good with tools, and my dad had taught me a lot about small engine repair, and that developed into regular mechanical capability that served me well. So worked in a truck shop summers, afternoon, after school,
So you did
primarily.
work after school?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
Which job did you like the best?
You know, really enjoyed the mechanical end. Got to work on tractor trailers, diesel engines, trucks of all shapes and sizes, and got pretty good at it, and enjoyed that.
Were you a good student?
I was an average student. I wouldn't say I was a good student, but I managed through, and I would say it wasn't because I lacked in intelligence. Maybe my teachers might disagree with that, but I enjoyed the extracurricular activity sometimes more than the studying, the memorization, and classwork. I enjoyed working different jobs. Participated in Boy Scouts. Later on in high school, joined the Naval Sea Cadet Corps, and very active and busy with that. And so that took up most of my afternoon hours. And
what was your favorite subject?
I did enjoy the sciences. I really enjoyed the science, earth science and physical science. Wasn't real strong in mathematics or English, but history and science.
Did you have a favorite teacher there?
You know, I had several teachers. My shop teacher was a great mentor, and he talked about life, and I would say my shop teacher I grew close to.
And what about an automobile? Did you have access to a car as
Mm-hmm.
a student in high school?
Oh yeah, yeah. That was a big part of growing up, and my dad, even at the age of I recollect around 12 years old, as we'd go fishing and hiking up in the mountains. We had an old pickup, and we'd get on the back roads, and so he says, you know, you got to learn how to drive, and might as well learn it from me. My dad would say, and so let me drive his shift 3-speed on the column. It was a 1958 Chevy pickup, red Chevy pickup, and so learned that, and then it's actually 15, and my uncle was able to he came across an old Jeep, an old 1948 Willys Jeep, and actually my dad was able to get that from him, and had that as a Christmas present. So I drove an old Jeep.
Did you have a girlfriend in high school?
Not any close girlfriends, but knew some, and my interests were more in what we might say the automobiles and driving and being out and about and
When you
whatnot.
did date, where did you go? Where did your gang go?
Oh, it was mostly there's social. You get together with a group of friends and mixed company, and usually after the basketball games, they would call it a barn dance, and because we were the Wheat Ridge farmers, and so they would call it the after the game program there in the high school gym, and you'd all get together and they'd play some of the music, and you could dance if you wanted, but they always had refreshments, and that was usually the extent of my social life.
How many students in your class?
We had, I want to say 1,400.
In your class?
Yeah, it was a large school, and so a large number.
And what year did you graduate?
1970. Mm-hmm.
What did you do upon graduation?
Well, as soon as graduated from high school, this was kind of right at the height of the Vietnam War, and I had a rather high draft number, and so the likelihood of being drafted was relatively slim, but I had certainly wanted to join the military in some capacity. But my dad encouraged me to attend college and perhaps take over his business. And so I went to University of Northern Colorado, majored in business administration.
Where is that located?
That's located in Greeley, Colorado.
You spent how many years up there?
4 years. I graduated within 4 years, a degree in business administration.
Did you like that?
I did enjoy it. Greeley's a wonderful community. It was nice, smaller sized college, and made some very close, good friends up there.
Who were some of your close friends?
A roommate by the name of Vi Wickham, and another guy, Denny Shoger, and we all had a very strong Christian faith as we had grown up. Your faith becomes even more important later on in high school and college, and so we would attend worship services on Sunday, and we'd have Bible studies in the dormitory, and just really grew close. And
what church did you attend there during school hour?
Went to various churches when I would be home on the weekends. Of course, attend with my parents and brother and sister at Augustana, but up in Greeley attended several different Baptist churches and whatnot.
Did you work in college?
Yes, I did. Almost full-time, working again in a truck shop.
What were you doing there?
Mechanic, basically. Do everything from tire repair to engine maintenance and tune-ups and washing, anything that had to do with the trucks.
Greeley?
In Greeley. Mm-hmm.
What was the name of it?
It was called Truck Rentals Incorporated, and later became Feld Truck Rentals.
Did you have your Chevy with you?
Well, I'd sold my, it was for college, I'd sold my Jeep and bought a car from my aunt. It was a 62 Chevy Impala. And so took that up to college with me, and that was a good running car.
How often did you get home?
Oh, usually come home, maybe once or twice a month, because I'd usually work on the weekends and work on Saturdays and Sundays. Usually had Sundays off, but
Did your mother have any special meal that she knew you liked when you would come home?
oh, she always knew I liked spaghetti and meatloaf, and a real specialty was Swedish meatballs. So on my birthday and special occasion, she would make Swedish meatballs.
Now, your sister, had she gone to school?
Yeah, she attended Trinity University down in San Antonio, Texas, and more in the theater arts area. So.
All right, and your brother who followed you?
He also attended Greeley University in Northern Colorado and majored in business administration as well. After college, he did a little real estate and then got into sales and marketing and worked for Coors Brewery for several years and several other breweries in their marketing departments.
How did you get interested in the Air Force?
Well, always, going back to the early days when my dad says, someday when you get in the Army, it was just an assumption. And and then when it came time to choose whether to go into the military or go to college, I chose the college route and had in the back of my mind, well, maybe when I graduate from college, I could become an officer and go through officer training school and still be part of the military that way. But it was about my third year in college, started thinking about life in general, and my dad was getting ready to sell his little printing shop, and just knowing how hard he struggled as a small business owner and different things. It was during that time when I think the Lord really started working in my life, and I started sensing a definite call to go into ministry. And so as I would talk to my home pastor about that notion, and how do you know when you're called to go into the ministry and whatnot, and he would give me the ins and outs of what the ministry is all about. And
what was his name?
Marbury Anderson. He was our senior pastor at Augustana at the time, and just a great godly man, and there weren't too many of us in the youth group that had an inkling to go into the ministry, so he felt a real strong desire to help mentor me and encourage me any way that he could to get me to seek the Lord's calling and go into ministry. But as I thought about it, I still had that itch, I guess, for lack of a better term, to serve this country and to be a part of the military. And so I told him, I said, well, I'd certainly consider going to seminary after I graduate from college, but I would like to spend at least a couple years in the military. And he more or less talked me out of that, saying, if you really are serious about going into the seminary, into the ministry, you better do it right after you graduate, because once you put it off, it's going to be very, very hard to go back. And so I took his advice and sought the Lord's will, and that's what I did. So right after college, went directly to seminary, Lutheran Seminary. And
where was that located?
And that was in St. Paul, Minnesota. And so I think your original question was what made me decide to go into the military. This is a long answer to a good question. But let me just fast forward a number of years. During my second call, serving a church down in Canyon City, there happened to be one of the area pastors who was attending one of the local meetings, one of the clergy meetings, and he was dressed in his Air Force uniform. And I sat next to him and I said, you know, what's this all about? You're serving in the military and you're a pastor, full-time pastor. And so he told me all about the Air Force Reserves and what a great opportunity that was. He was a captain. He'd been just newly promoted. He was all excited, and he was telling me the great things that he was doing and how much fun it was. And he was stationed at Laurie Air Force Base at the time. He was serving a church down in Pueblo, and so he invited me to come with him when he was on duty, and he showed me around Laurie and had me introduce me to his commander, and just thoroughly impressed. And it was at that time, you know, after putting off going into the military all those years, I said, you know, this really sounds wonderful. Being part of the chaplaincy and the ministry that I've been called to serve in, but yet still be able to serve this country.
When did you graduate then from St. Paul?
Graduated in 1978 from Northwestern Lutheran Seminary in St. Paul, and then served a congregation in Indiana, a little Lutheran church in Winchester, Indiana. Was there for 3 years, and then accepted a call to Trinity Lutheran Church in Canyon City, Colorado, and that was in 1981.
You were still a bachelor?
No, I was married, actually, married Lynn Johnson from Kirkhoven, Minnesota. She grew up on Kirkhoven, Minnesota, about 110 miles west of Minneapolis.
Where and when did you meet?
We met, actually, it was at a hootenanny. She was attending Fairview Nursing School at the time. And it used to be that the seminary students mostly were men at the time, and nursing students were mostly female. And so it was because it was part of a Lutheran hospital program. They oftentimes had social gatherings for the seminary students and the nursing students, and they'd have kind of fellowship times, and they'd call them hootenannies. And so we saw each other.
The first time you met her?
Oh yes, very distinctly. And
Tell me about it.
well, it was I believe it was a Friday afternoon, and we went over, and the nursing school, part of the hospital, had its own dormitory, and the dormitory had a lounge area, kind of a recreation. They had no ping pong tables, and I remember playing ping pong, and we got paired up together and whatnot, and so that was the first time. And the next time, the seminary students invited the nursing students over to the seminary, and we had a small little gym, and so we'd play volleyball. And so I picked Lynn out right away. She had waist-length hair, and just stunning, and just a beautiful smile, and just a very wholesome Minnesotan look. And so we had visited over punch at those events, but it was after the event there at the seminary in the gym. She had to take her hair ribbon off her hair because she'd sometimes tie it up when we were playing volleyball, and I noticed she had put it down on the bleachers, and then after it was all over, everybody went their way and was kind of helped cleaning up, and I saw she had left her ribbon on the bleachers, and I knew it was hers, and so I was able to that weekend find out her number and where she lived, and gave her a call and says, well, I want to return your hair ribbon.
Great.
So that's how it all started. It's over 38 years ago. I'm married 36 years.
And how long did you just remain boyfriend, girlfriend?
Oh, I think we dated probably for about a year, and she took me home to her farm, and met her family, and she has 6 brothers and sisters, and I was just so impressed with her family, a very godly family, and
Where did they come
just
from originate?
on her dad's side, being a Johnson, his parents and grandparents all came from Sweden, and then on her mom's side, I know she was from South Dakota, and I believe from an English background on her mom's side.
And you got along well with the family?
Oh, very, very much so. I think because I had a knack for the mechanics. Her dad would often he'd go out and be working on the tractors and whatnot, and I'd ask to go out and be with him, and so I would volunteer to. I said, well, he couldn't get one of his pickup trucks going. I said, well, let me take a look at it, and pretty soon I had it running, and he couldn't believe it, and I just took a real interest in that, and he felt, all right, this guy's all right,
Did they live on a farm?
Yes, they did.
And what did they farm?
Primarily corn, wheat, oats, just a little bit of everything. Raised some cattle, and just a very picturesque farm, just your typical upper Midwest farm. And
Where was she and her family?
She had 4 older brothers, and then she was a twin, and then she has an older sister, and then a younger brother.
Did the brothers give you any grief?
Oh, they always kidded me about my small feet. Being 6'3", and then they all had size 14, 15 feet, and they were all tall. They were all over 6 feet, and so as we would sit around the house, and oftentimes after church, then we'd turn on the football game and watch Minnesota Vikings, of course, and we'd all be sitting with our legs stretched out and our feet out there, and they would laugh at me because I said, man. And I said, how big are your feet? I said, well, they're 9.5, and they couldn't get over that a guy 6'3" would have small feet, but anyway, so.
So when did you ask her for her hand?
Well,
Father.
it happened to be at the time, my 3rd year in seminary. I was doing a year of internship up in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, northern Minnesota, over on the western side, and Lynn was still going to, or no, she had graduated from nursing school, but working in the hospital there in Minneapolis.
Where did she work?
At Fairview Hospital, Fairview South, I think it was called, and so she was staying with 3 of her old roommates, and they had a little house there, and so it happened to be the coldest night of the year, and I'd left Detroit Lakes, and it was just right after her birthday, and so I drove down, and it was 44 degrees below zero. And that was without the windshield, just absolutely freezing. And just driving in that, I could hardly get the engine to cool off, because it just kept running cold, and there was no heat, because it was as soon as it go through the radiator. But a trick we had with diesel engines and the tractor trailers, running too cold, you'd take a piece of cardboard and put in front of the radiator. So to make the 200-mile trip, just keep the engine running and things not freezing up, I put the cardboard, and no problem at all. And so made it down there, and brought my guitar, and I used to sing and play a little guitar, and made up a song, and gave her a ring, sang her a song, and took her out to dinner. So
I suspect you don't remember the song.
it was one I made up myself.
How did it go?
I better hadn't, because I'll start tearing up here and won't be able to finish. But I think I could still play it on the guitar if I had to. So I haven't played in years. But
when were you married?
We were married 1977 at Lynn's home church there in rural Minnesota, just real close to her farm. And
Who married you?
it was actually the pastor that I was serving under on internship, pastor from Trinity Lutheran Church in Detroit Lakes, and then her home pastor. He was an interim pastor at the time, and they did the ceremony. And
What church was that?
it was Salem Covenant Church, rural, and just a beautiful setting, and had it at 7 o'clock in the evening. That's so that all the farmers could finish milking and come in after chores and make it to the church service. And a small little church, it sat about 200 people, and it was just jam packed, and because it was a big deal. And when one of the Johnson girls got married.
Did your family get to come to the wedding?
Mm-hmm. All my family got to be there, and so that was
Nice.
just a real treat.
Did you get away somewhere after that?
Well, then what I did, I told my wife our honeymoon was going to be camping along the north shore of Lake Superior. So that's what I told her. But the plan was to take her to Hawaii. And so I told her sister, I said, well, she's going to be packing for, put her overcoat and cold weather gear and be ready for that. But actually, if you could pack another bag with her swimming suit and some shorts and some lighter weight material, and so we after our wedding we flew to Hawaii for a week in Hawaii. So
A week in Hawaii. Where'd you stay in Hawaii?
first on the island of Oahu at the Hilton Hawaiian, and then we went to Kauai at the Kauai Hilton, and then the island of one of the other islands, Maui. Maui. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Where'd you go when you came back? Where did you live?
Well, then that was in August of 1977, and I was getting ready to finish my last year of seminary, and Lynn had just acquired a job at, it was called Group Health Clinic, and she was working in the OBGYN clinic there, and that was just within walking distance. We lived in student housing, and so the clinic was right across the street from the seminary, and just worked out ideally for our last year in seminary. And so.
And then where did you go when you graduated?
When I graduated, received a call from a little church in Winchester, Indiana. And so we were willing to go just anywhere and do anything wherever the Lord would lead us. And so we interviewed down there and just fell in love with the people. And it was a smaller town and struggling church, and it just really felt an opportunity to help this congregation grow and develop and get back on its feet. And
You were the senior pastor or the only?
yeah, the only pastor. I was pastor, Sunday school teacher. We didn't hardly have money for curriculum, so I'd write the Sunday school curriculum for the week, and got together a little choir, and it was a little mission. It started off about 10 years earlier, and just a little A-frame church, but it had a pipe organ, and just pretty unique, and it was hard to find someone that could actually play it, but it was.
How long were you there?
We were there 3 years, and our son was born while we were there, and then we
He was
moved.
born in where? Hospital?
In a hospital in Richmond, Indiana. That was the next larger town. We were about 30 minutes north of Richmond, and larger hospital. They had a little tiny hospital in Winchester, but it wasn't known for its medical expertise, and so.
What was his name?
His name was actually George Edward Meister V, I had to keep the dynasty going, but it was hard for anyone to call this tiny little baby George. So I believe it was Lynn's mom, when she came to visit, said, well, he's just like Chip off the old block. And so we ended up calling him Chip, and he goes by Chip to this day. Mm-hmm.
What is Chip doing now?
Chip is a systems engineer with Lockheed Martin. He graduated from Colorado School of Mines, and he's been working this job a good 7-8 years now.
Where is he?
Mm-hmm.
Where?
Works at Lockheed Martin down in Littleton. Mm-hmm.
Colorado.
Yeah, correct, Littleton.
All right, and then where did you go after Indiana?
Then after Indiana was called to a church in Canyon City, Colorado.
When you say called, can you explain how that happens?
Well, it happens a couple different ways, but typically you put your name into a hat if you're interested in moving from one call to another, and with the Lutheran Church anyway. And so Lynn and I, we were interested in. We loved Indiana; it was a great state, but it wasn't home, or we didn't sense. We loved either Minnesota or get closer to our family in Minnesota or Colorado. So I put my name into the hat in both areas, synodical areas, and the bishop called and from Colorado says, well, we have a church down in Canyon City. Would you be interested in interviewing? And I said, oh yeah, that's a beautiful area of the state, and knew that
Where's
that area.
Canyon City located?
Canyon City is located about 35 miles southwest of Colorado Springs, just right in the foothills, and the Royal Gorge Bridge is down there. A lot of good hunting, fishing. It's right on the Arkansas River, and it's a beautiful area.
And
So-
did you were accepted?
Yes, on the first after the first interview, I think they decided they'd like to have me come back a second time just to preach, and so came back and they issued a call right away, a letter of call, and so we moved within a couple of months and enjoyed it down there. It was a very fruitful ministry, and
The name of the church?
was Trinity Lutheran Church, and nice congregation. They just built a new church building a couple years before I'd gotten there, and they'd had some struggles. Again, it was a developing church, and they needed someone to kind of grow the ministry there. And
How long were you there?
I was there for 5 years, and really enjoyed it. And our oldest daughter was born down there in the hospital at the time, Andrea. And
where is Andrea today?
Andrea is her and her husband and our granddaughter live at Fort Dix, New Jersey. It's a joint base, Fort Dix and McGuire Air Force Base, a joint base operation there in the heart of New Jersey. And they just moved there several months ago from Mildenhall, England. Andrea's husband is a pilot in the Air Force, and so that's taken them near and far.
And his name?
Is Scott Frohart, Major Scott Frohart. He's a KC-135 pilot.
That for refueling.
Correct, a refueling pilot. Mm-hmm.
All right, and she was born then. Did that happen to be the place where you had gone to this place to see and ran into a member of the Air Force?
Right.
chaplaincy?
Yeah, it was. We used to have district meetings, they would call them, and in our district was pastors from Colorado Springs, Pueblo, Canyon City, a few of the outlying areas, and we'd get together about every month and sit and visit and talk shop. And when his name was Anderson, Pastor Anderson, Gary Anderson, I believe his name was, and he came all dressed in his blue uniform, and I was just so impressed, and he gave me the ins and outs of what it would be like to be a Air Force chaplain, and said they were looking for pastors who'd like to join the reserves.
And what did you do about it?
Well, it's quite a lengthy process to go through the acceptance to get into the reserves. You have to go, physical and a lot of paperwork, background, and particularly for the chaplaincy program to become an officer, you go through a revised commissioning process. It's called a direct commission program for doctors and for the legal attorneys. Would go through a special commissioning process because you're given credit for your professional degree, for your master's level degree, and other professional work.
Where did that take place?
Well, for the background, because I had 8 years of pastoral ministry, that counted in terms of being qualified as a chaplain. And then you go through an endorsing process with the denomination and get the blessings from the Lutheran Church, and then approval to become part of the Air Force Reserves. And then after that, you're sent to chaplain school, 4-week chaplain school, and then a revised officer training school down at Lackland.
Where did you take
program.
the oath of office?
I actually, because the reserves do it somewhat, we're called IMAs, that's individual mobilization augmentee. You literally are an individual, but you're assigned to an active duty base. But they needed to have me take the oath of office before they would issue me any orders to attend the base. So it was the office secretary of the retirement community that I was working at the time when I got the pre-commissioning papers. As the secretary, she read the form. I raised my right hand and took the oath, and she was a notary public, and that was good enough for them. Sent it back to the reserves, and
You were commissioned at
then
that time.
correct.
As a what?
As a first lieutenant, typically as a chaplain or doctor, attorney, because of the years that you spend, in that field, in your respective field, they give you credit for that, and oftentimes will have you start as a first lieutenant.
And your wife was backing you, of course. How did your father feel?
Oh, he couldn't have been more proud. He just was so proud. He couldn't believe it. Not only to be in the military, but to be an officer, and something he had always aspired to, but never had the chance or the opportunity. And
your mother's feeling?
oh, just delighted. And it's really the best of both worlds. Not only to serve in the military, but to be a chaplain. The religious part, the spiritual part, really is the most important. And for my mom, that was for her to be there at, when I put on the uniform, it was great.
Where did you go after that?
Well, then I finished the orientation course. You have to go through about 6-8 weeks of orientation, basic training.
And that was where?
That was at Lackland, and then also down at Keesler Air Force Base. We did a lot of field training and
Mississippi.
down in Mississippi, and we worked right with the doctors and the medics out on field maneuvers and just getting a real feel of what it's like to be on the combat field, and some of the things that you could run into as a chaplain. And
How old were you then?
boy, I was in my 30s. I can't. I'd have to add up the numbers there,
You
but
had 2 children?
At the time, two children, yes, and actually, yeah,
Now,
two.
when did you didn't move down there, you were still living in
Right. So
Colorado?
in the reserves, you would just have to take time off from your civilian job to go do that. And fortunately, I worked for a boss who was very amenable to giving me the time off, and it worked out quite well.
And you were there how long
In
in the training?
At the training, it was about a total. They broke it up into segments, and so one was 4 weeks, another 2 weeks, and another an additional 2 weeks, and then every year there would be workshops and conferences to where you would continue on with that training. A lot of training that you would do on your own, just in terms of the classroom type studies. And
The training that you got in the field down there, how was that compared to what you saw when you got into active duty?
back then, in those days, that was back in the late 80s. There was kind of not a whole lot was going on. It was post Vietnam era. You know, we were in the green uniforms. I still remember out in the field exercise, you had the old tin pot hats, and you know, you'd shave with those, and had the canteens, and you would have the MREs, but they don't have the MREs like they do today, and so they would get a superheater and heat up hot water in a 50-gallon drum, and then you'd just get a clothes hanger or something, hang your MRE down in the boiling water, and more or less they were boil bags and whatnot. You know, not a whole lot different from the Vietnam era, or even World War II era. It was still the web belts and the canteens and the survival knives.
Who were training you?
They were special. Oftentimes they would come from security forces, but they had the regular drill instructors, and so we were trained just as the active duty would be trained, and they were all active duty personnel that we had to meet the exact same standards as our active duty counterparts, because as IMAs, individual mobilization augmentees, we were there to backfill if our active duty counterpart was sent forward or deployed or whatnot. And so we had to meet the same physical standards, educational standards, training standards as they would.
Did you enjoy it?
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't get enough of it, and my first actual assignment was at the Air Force Academy, working with the cadets, and worked out of the community center chapel, which was the primary chapel for all the base personnel. It wasn't the cadet chapel, but the chapel that sits out in the community center area next to the prep school. And so
You were there how long?
I was assigned there for 5 years, and would do all my training, and they would have me preach and teach. And then what was really fun was working with the prep school students, and we would do courses on leadership and ethics, and
Let me ask you, were you activated at that time? Or that was
not at that. That was still pretty much the reserves. You'd spend
how
one.
long would you spend there per year?
Typically, you would be given 30 days required, 30 days per year. Typically your 2 weeks active duty time, and then days that you would go down there each month. And as an IMA reservist, you weren't restricted to just a certain weekend, but they would call you down whenever they needed you. And so oftentimes you'd go down and spend 2 or 3 days at a time, or a week at a time, and then whatnot. So.
What type of work did they ask you to do there?
General chaplaincy work. There was a lot of counseling. You'd spend time as a counselor. When you were there for extended period of time, you had the duty phone, And so if any emergencies, night or day, you'd have to respond to that. Taught classes. You helped with Bible studies. Some of the committees that they had, the men of the chapel, the Protestant women of the chapel, just like a regular civilian church would have its different committees and organizations, and you'd participate in that and help do the finances and budgeting. And
you also had other denominations, other religions.
Yes, the other chaplains,
Jewish.
all different faith backgrounds that we would work with, and oftentimes it never became a stumbling block or a bone of contention. It was always a learning experience to find out, what other faith groups believed and how they practiced and how they worshiped, and really opened my eyes to a lot of things I'd never learned in seminary or growing up.
Oh, that interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So you were still living in Canyon City?
Well, by that time we had moved back to Denver and lived in Arvada at the time. So I was working at the time after we left Canyon City. That's when I first had the opportunity to work in long-term health care, and so became the chaplain at Colorado Lutheran Home, and then they asked me to get my administrator's license, and so worked as chaplain and assistant administrator.
And where did you live then? In Arvada, did you say?
In Arvada, just off of 80th and Wadsworth.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm.
How long did you stay there?
We were there 10 years, and then just had a sense to see if there wasn't an opportunity to work for another organization and maybe become an administrator. And it happened to be at that time they were just getting ready to build, or they were in the process of building Covenant retirement communities here in Westminster. And so I applied with them, and they said, well, we don't have an opening here, but we do have an opening for a nursing home administrator on Mercer Island, Washington, with Covenant Shores. And so we sensed that's where the Lord was leading us, and so we moved up to Washington State.
I want to get back to your active duty when you were activated. When did that happen?
The true activations, when for extended period of time, that didn't happen until after 9/11. And at the time we had moved back from Washington State. I was back up there about 3 years, and then moved back to Colorado, and had a job with Christian Living Communities. But 9/11 happened, and I had just been newly assigned to Buckley Air Force Base, and that's of course that's when everyone started to deploy, setting up bases throughout the Middle East, and so both the lead chaplains at Buckley were deployed. And so that left a real void. So I was the only reservist at the time, only reserve chaplain. So they activated me, and I served off and on for about 9 months there at Buckley.
You were still living in Nevada.
Correct. And so it was close enough to where I could stay at home, but every day that was I took a leave of absence from my civilian job, and then worked.
What was the
worked
day
on
like
base.
for you there?
It would start 6:30, 7 o'clock. I would leave the house about 5:30. Get out there ahead of time. Oftentimes I was the only chaplain on base there, at least on the active duty side, and we didn't actually have a chapel building. We worked out of the headquarters office building. And there was everything from, because a lot of people were beginning to deploy, a lot of counseling, a lot of thought, well, this is not what I signed up for. I didn't think I'd ever have to deploy. I didn't think and things really began to change, and this whole war on terrorism began to really kind of sink in, and people were wanting to rethink their line of work, and so a lot of counseling and stress on families. People who had never deployed before weren't used to that and being separated from family and loved ones. So we did a lot of we had a small little staff. Did a lot of work with individuals, and then we'd put on fellowship activities and doing things with morale and welfare for the troops. Do a lot of visitation out in the units, working with the commanders, and as they would face different struggles, they would lean on the chaplain to do some damage control in terms of some people that weren't quite up to snuff.
When you were with the Central Command IMAs to the various commands, I suspect,
Mm-hmm.
How did that, what duration of time did that take? The various places that you went, for example.
Okay. When I was activated to Central Command, I was first sent down to MacDill Air Force Base. It's headquarters for Central Command. And Central Command was the lead combatant command over all the operations throughout the Middle East. Both of course, they'd gone into Afghanistan and been there for a while, but then after 2003, then they were looking to go back into Iraq, and Operation Iraqi Freedom had kicked off, and so when I was sent to MacDill,
you were activated.
Correct. Mm-hmm. And so they had the headquarters there at MacDill, but because most of the operations was over in the Persian Gulf area, they had a forward operating command center over there. So they sent me as the designated chaplain to deploy over there, and was there for 4 months. And working in, it was their forward operating headquarters in, I'll just say, the Persian Gulf area. And so it was in the, right there in the headquarters, the command center, and worked in the Joint Operations Intelligence Center, and we'd put together all of the briefings, the daily briefings that would, you'd gather the information that would come down out of the region, what was going on in terms of the specific operations, the effectiveness, in terms of air operations, ground operations. Because it was a combatant command, it's a joint operation, so you had Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marine operations. We'd all be working together, and so it wasn't Air Force. My chaplain assistant, it was just me and a chaplain assistant. He was an Army sergeant, and so we held down did all the ministry and support.
There were no other chaplains there?
Within our compound, there weren't. On the post that we were assigned to, there was an Army chaplain, and he had an assistant, and so he would primarily serve the Army personnel, but ours was the joint operation. It was a totally separate compound. We were pretty much separated from everyone else, and due to security reasons, why they needed someone with the clearances and the access to to those operations.
Did you hold services for the other denominations, Catholic,
Mhm.
Jewish?
Yeah, I wouldn't conduct actual Sunday services there for us, but did mostly it was advising the commanders on religious affairs and some of the things that were happening there as part of the operation. They were wanting to get insight in terms of the different nuances of religious ideology, background, history, and how that might be a factor on what was going on.
Did you have any contact with the nationals there?
Just a little bit because we were in somewhat of a neutral country. There was some we very restricted in terms of getting off base, but mission oftentimes required us to move from one location to another, and so we did sometimes get off base and go to the main area.
How long were you there?
I was there for 4 months, and about 5 months overall, spending time back at MacDill Air Force Base.
While you were there, did you have opportunity to communicate with Lynn, your wife?
Quite a bit, mostly email. That was before the days of Skyping and whatnot. But I did have my own computer, and they allowed us the opportunity to send personal emails, and as long as it didn't interfere with the operations, and then we could make phone calls. They were sometimes a little bit difficult phone calling because you always had to go through the DSN, the military operators and whatnot. But sometimes that worked out best. So.
Your other activities with some of the other commands were similar?
Very, very similar. That was at Central Command. That was unique because that was because I was the only chaplain. It was and just working in that secured environment was quite unique. When I was with the Strategic Command in Omaha, that was all highly classified information and environment. And so that was primarily working with some of the various units and visitation and just being a pastoral presence in a very industrial, highly classified environment. And so that was fascinating. With Northern Command and Norad, which has to do more with homeland security and in the defense of this country, is particularly, that the Northern Command is the newest combatant command joint operation down in Colorado Springs. That stood up after 9/11. Before we never had given a whole lot of thought in terms of our national security, but when that was jeopardized after 9/11, well, then to have a combatant command that had the command and control over our operations in this country, Canada, Mexico, Alaska, was extremely important. And so our role as chaplains there, again, was advising senior leadership in terms of the moral and ethical religious issues that come up with anything that has to do with national security, with homeland events, both natural disasters and homemade disasters, and
any particular one that you could think of or talk about?
One of the most significant. There were always drills and training that would go on a daily basis. You were constantly training for this scenario or that scenario. There were major scenarios both in terms of natural disasters and man-made disasters. The most significant was our role that we played in the Haiti earthquake operation. Southern Command took the lead operation in dealing with that because that was in their geographical location. But Northern Command was in a supporting role, and we sent the Joint Task Force operation out of our combatant command to go down and lead the operations down there. And so we had a direct line down with everything that was going on. We sent supporting personnel. We would develop all the plans and policies in implementing the forces and the response necessary to alleviate the pain, suffering that was going on because of the earthquake. And so constantly it was 24/7 operation, day in, day out. We would
How long
constantly.
did you spend there?
I was there for 9 months at NORAD, Northern Command, and it's a joint command. That's why they call it NORAD, Northern Command. And so we had a fairly large staff, relatively speaking, as far as chaplain. We had our commander. I was the deputy command chaplain, and then we had a Canadian chaplain, worked primarily on the NORAD side of the equation. We had 4 reservists working with us that were activated and called in, and so we spent a constant time at the different planning cells, the command and control center, future operations cells, and just constantly planning, thinking ahead. What do we need to be doing here? How do we handle this? Because there was so much pain, suffering, death. A lot of issues with the religious component that was down there, and how to deal with the dead and the dying, and working with intergovernmental agencies, Red Cross, number of religious relief agencies, and coordinating their efforts as we would hear back from the field what the needs were. How can we respond? How can we put into request either for forces or for additional medical support, civilian support, humanitarian support, and quite an event that was
It seemed
huge.
that your background and training was ideal for those situations for you.
It really was, because working in that environment and on the combatant level in a joint operation, it has a language of its own. And to just come in as a reservist, it would be like walking into a foreign country and you don't know what they're talking about. You don't know the systems or the approaches or the policies, procedures. And so to have that training at Central Command and extremely helpful. And
Let me ask you about your deployment.
mhm.
The Afghanistan, no.
That was actually Iraq
Iraq,
when I
yes.
deployed for
Did I
this.
pronounce the town name?
It was Balad.
Balad.
That's the typical Western way to. I'm sure there's some nuance there in terms of the.
Tell me when that
Yeah.
happened and tell me about it.
Okay, that came about. They were needing to send another team. They would rotate teams in and out of Iraq, at least on the Air Force side, about every 6 to 9 months. Some assignments were a year, but every cycle there would be a whole new team of staff and personnel that would come in from all over, whether it be from the National Guard, from reserve units, from IMA individuals that were being called up from active duty, and so they had contacted me in terms of filling a spot at Balad as a senior chaplain without hesitation, jumped at the chance. Quite an experience, knowing what had gone on there, what the needs were, and
Who was there then?
what kind of.
The Air Force component.
The Air Force they were drawing down. This was toward the latter stages of the Iraq campaign, and so they were in the process of downsizing. So they were moving some of the aerial squadrons out of Iraq. A lot of the units the Army was drawing down, but the main operations were centered in several different areas, and one was at Balad. Balad was located 43 miles north of Baghdad. It was one of the premier air bases, both during Saddam Hussein's time. It was his premier base, and also it was one of our main operating air bases during the most of the Iraq conflict. So it was when I was there. When I got there, there were about 28,000 troops. Both Army. It was called Joint Base Balad.
What year was that?
That was 2010, towards the end of 2010. Part of my deployment was training down in Texas. Kind of battle hardening and going through, deployed preparation and training on some of the vehicle for myself, and with security forces that were being deployed over there. And so I was the only chaplain for it was about a 3-week training battle hardening and kind of honing your skills on your deployment capability and field exercises, a lot of land navigation, working with security forces. Of course, they were constantly working with their artillery and weapons and security procedures and operations, and then providing that support with them. And then, it's a whole new ball game in terms of not just protecting the air base, but perimeter patrol and being conscious constantly of attacks, mortar attacks, IEDs, and how to go about patrolling, being part of fire teams and whatnot. So that was a good education. Being 58 years old, I kind of stretched some of the physical capabilities, but I loved every minute of it, and I could. I'm proud enough to say I kept up with the 20-year-olds pretty well, and so it was in a real sense a lot of fun.
Colonel, what was a typical day like for you?
Over in Iraq, a typical day, because it's 24/7, you don't know one day from the next. My responsibility as the senior chaplain, responsibility for about 14 chaplains and about 10 chaplain assistants, both on the Army side and the Air Force side. You spend very little time back in the bunk because it's just a bed and a room and a little TV and a telephone, but nothing on TV worth watching and whatnot. So I spent literally good 18 hours, 20 hours back in the chapel office, and then because you're going 24 hours a day and things are just as busy at night as they are during the day, you'd just soon be out there working, being with the troops. Oftentimes you'd spend a few hours in the office just doing the reports and putting together your plans and going over whatever needed to be reviewed with the chapel staff, but then sending them out wherever they needed to go and wherever they needed to be, and they had daily assignments, and so we'd make those assignments, and we'd do ongoing training and hammer out issues when there were problems, but spent a good part of the time just being out visiting the troops, whether it be out on the perimeter, working with security forces, visiting the guard towers, working with the commanders. There's always meetings, planning meetings, operations meetings. Spending time in the hospital was probably the most important role we felt, and we had a full-time hospital chaplain, but we each took turns being giving relief, and then just spending time over there because the injured were still coming in on a regular basis, both American and some of the local Iraqi troops also were being treated, and so it was a very, very busy hospital even as things were drawing down.
Did you go off base?
Very little did we get off base. It was just unless you had a need to get off base, you didn't. The security forces they were constantly out patrolling. They had been given the mission. They had taken the mission over from the Army to patrol, do all the explosive ordnance detection, and provide security out within about a few miles of the base, just to keep an eye on things, keep the area clear, and any threat that might be coming in from the region. They were keeping an eye out.
How long were you there?
I was there. It was over 6 months, almost seven total months there from start to finish.
You flew over there. Where did the flight stop at, refuel at?
We landed in, as I left the country out of Hartfield-Jackson Airport in St. Louis, took they call it the rotator, and that's a true plane, civilian plane that contracts with the military, and flew into it was Leipzig, Germany, in a driving snowstorm, and I was in the middle of the night. They had to refuel, and as I looked out the window, it was dark, and you could, because of the blizzard that was going on, you could hardly see the runway lights. They were just a blur, and you could tell the wind was just blowing horrifically. And I thought, how in the world did they land this plane? And there was probably a good, whatever the capacity was, every single seat. You had very little room. Of course, no first class or anything. Everything was coach class and very little leg room. And so we landed in Leipzig. They let us off for about a half hour, and they refueled and then took off again, and then landed down the next day in Qatar at Al Udeid, base Al Udeid, and that was the main base in terms of the jumping off point back up into either Afghanistan or Iraq. And so I was held up there about 2.5 days, and then you just had to wait to get a flight up to wherever you were going in Iraq. And so I remember it was finally Christmas Day, or excuse me, Christmas Eve, and they said they told me they had a flight probably going to leave sometime later that day, but the plane had mechanical problems or whatnot, and they wouldn't have another one till Christmas Day. So I waited, and lucky enough to attend services. It was an outdoor service Christmas Eve at 11 o'clock, Christmas Eve, and just beautiful. Just short sleeves because you'd gone from below zero weather, and now it had to be probably probably a good 85, 90 degrees, still 11 o'clock at night. And this was, now the 24th of December.
This was in 2011.
2010. Yeah, Christmas 2010. And then finally got word that they were going to get another crew together and get a flight up to Balad sometime during the day on Christmas. So left around noontime Christmas Day, KC, or not a KC, but a C-130 and cargo ship. And as a good chaplain, you let everybody else get on first. And so I brought up the rear, and even though they, as a colonel, you're invited to come on first, I said, no, I'll waive that right, and you get the troops on. I want to make sure they're comfortable and well taken care of. And so I followed them up the ramp, and and lo and behold, there were no more seats. so they said, well, you can sit in the jump seat up in the cockpit. So that was a real blessing in disguise. And so they put a headset on me, and got to watch the whole operation. And even in the jump seat, it was more comfortable than being in the netted seat in the back, and up against all the equipment and supplies and whatnot. And so got full tour of the whole Persian Gulf, flying up the middle of it and seeing all there is to see. And Iran off to the right, and Saudi Arabia off to the left, and see all the oil wells and the tankers and the refineries along the way, and then to fly over Kuwait City and over the Euphrates and Tigris River and up the valley there. And then what was significant on that day is they told me, well, chaplain, we need your 2 eyeballs. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, they were just about getting ready to land. They had about 20 more minutes. They said, what we're going to do is a tactical landing, and because they're getting reports of some small gunfire in the area, and they shoot at you, even with the little stuff. So they had me look out the port window and said, any puff of smoke that you see, you let us know right away. And so they would come in at a certain altitude, and then as soon as they get almost directly over the base, they just drop straight down. And that was a thrill. And for
good sense.
I don't mind the high-speed thrill rides, but that was okay. I was just glad to be there. But I start thinking, yeah, we're not back in Kansas anymore. This is a war zone, and now this stuff's for real. And I think it finally settled in. So it was good to get on the ground and whatnot. But being Christmas Day, that was memorable.
It was special for you.
Mm-hmm.
And when did you leave there?
Left there. It was around the first part of July, 2011. So was there. Number of months, and then you go back, and then you have reconstitution time and whatnot. Took several days to get back, because you have to go back to Qatar and then out process there and turn in most of all your heavy gear and your battle rattle, they call it, and then you just have to wait for that rotator to come back, and so that took a different route that went up to Aviano, Italy, and spent some time there, and then up to Ramstein Air Force Base, and then jumped off from Ramstein back to St. Louis. Or no, actually flew into Baltimore airport, and then took a flight from Baltimore back to Denver.
Where did your family meet you with you?
They actually met me. They back up. Didn't land in Denver because my orders read Peterson Air Force Base, so I had to fly into Peterson. So my wife came down. It was on a Saturday, and so my wife came down and met me at the airport, and that was quite a homecoming, and just the civilians that were there and knew that as a plane returning from the war zone, they all stood up and applauded and clapped, and the most beautiful part was my wife.
Seeing the family.
Yeah.
Were you kids there?
No, they weren't able to come. I just in second thought I should have asked them to come, but they thought it'd be nice just to have
Very
Lynn.
special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very special.
Neat. Where did you go from there? What kind of duty did you have?
Well, then then I was newly attached to Air Force Space Command, because as a reservist they'll move you around wherever needed, and so I was needed at Air Force Space Command as the IMA command chaplain to the active duty command chaplain, and they were working on a program, a resiliency program for active duty Air Force personnel, primarily those high-stressed units. They have combat communications groups, they have security forces, some of the highly intense communication squadrons that are under intense stress. A lot of them had been deployed, coming back from deployment, and so there was a real concern and issue with what they call the resiliency of the forces. The Air Force was going through different models of responding to that, putting together workshops and programs to deal with those issues. And I teamed up with another chaplain in the area, and we put together a program that the commander at Space Command really thought was ideal and very effective, just in terms of its brevity. We could do a workshop in about half a day to a day, and deal with some very serious subjects in terms of your physical, mental, emotional, social issues that you deal with when you're under such stress, and what our military personnel are going through in this day and age. And so we were given the assignment of going to all the different Space Command bases within Space Command, and some of the tenant units and some of the detachments to put on these workshops. So following my deployment over the next about 8-10 months, we put together the program, and then we took it and we flew to different bases and did those workshops. And then finally, it was about May of 2012 that the orders came to an end, and there was no money to continue the program. So that's when I started looking towards retirement from the reserves and seeking a civilian job to continue ministry.
Well, listed among your 18 awards and declarations that you received, which ones stand out in your mind? Which are you most proud of, or which ones stand out?
They're all, they're extremely important, and you're so very proud each and every one that you get and receive. And some you work much harder for than others. Others are because you've spent a certain amount of time in a given area. They just automatically grant those to you. But I think it's the joint awards, the ones that the one I spent over in with the Central Command Forward, the Iraqi Campaign Medal. Everybody gets one of those, but that was special. Those are special memories and things that you never forget. The one I worked probably the hardest for was it was the Joint Meritorious Service NORAD Northcom. That took a lot of effort and doing, but
Was that with the two Oakley busters?
yeah, that was well, the Joint Meritorious Service Medal. That was the only one that I got. That's the highest one that I had received, and being that it's a joint award, that's somewhat special. But just being part of the NORAD Northcom mission, that was unique in itself. But more than anything else, you can wear the medals, but it was the cross that I'm most proud of. So.
The cross and the lapel.
Mm-hmm.
On the
Right.
left side.
That's your right. Right over your heart, and so.
Oh, nice. Just a couple more questions on your service here. What's the most memorable time that you've spent in your duty?
The most memorable, of course, and certainly the most recent was deployment to Iraq, and all the things that happened there, and what I did, and just to be part of that operation and to see firsthand probably the best of life, but also the ugliest of life. That was character building. A lot of people never have that experience, nor could many even comprehend or understand what that's about. But you come away with a different appreciation of life and how valuable all life is, regardless, where it is, and I guess it allowed me a sense to where I can't even begin to fathom what my forefathers went through, and World War I and II, and the Korean War and the Vietnam era, and what those conditions were like. Nowhere compared with my conditions, and I had it, I think, fairly comfortable, very comfortable, and just to know what the other battles were like, and those experiences and what they went through. Just I take my hat off to them every day, and so proud to be part of that ongoing history.
What was the most fun mission that you ever had?
Most fun, I'd have to say, my son-in-law, being a pilot and being in the right place at the right time, he got me a ride in the back seat of a T-38, and it was a regular operational mission, training mission for student fighter pilots, and it was a regular training scenario in a dogfight, and just to ride in the back seat and see what they have to do, and the stresses and strains they go through, and what it takes to be an actual combat fighter pilot it was incredible. But that was, I'd have to say, that was really fun.
Did you open the little bag that you get to?
No, not and I was very proud of that, because they figured I'd end up needing that little bag that you strap to your to your knee, and I they always tell you, if you start feeling sick, you hit a little red button, and that's extra oxygen. But I didn't even need that. I wasn't about to be a wimp when you have a chance like that. So I held it down and enjoyed the ride.
That was with your son-in-law?
He wasn't the pilot, but he pulled the right strings to allow me to get on that mission.
It had to be some difficulties when you met some of these incoming choppers coming from the battlefield.
Yeah, that was probably the hardest, because of the operation tempo there at Balad, and one of the primary missions was the theater hospital. It was the only theater hospital in all of Iraq at that point in time, and so all the injured and wounded migrated to that for all the emergency care, and so what sticks in my mind every day is the sound of helicopters. There's always 2 helicopters coming in from the field, and when you hear them, you know that they're bringing the injured and wounded and the suffering. And so the chaplains would play a big role in going over, and we would take turns carrying the pager, and the pager every time it would go off, and day and night constantly, and it would have how many injured on board, and whether they were friendly or foe or whoever, and so you jump in your boots and head on over and then respond, and they would come in too, and they would land out behind the hospital, and what was most memorable is they would gather the wounded off the helicopters. They would bring them in through the original tent that was constructed when the base was first stood up. The hospital first stood up back at the beginning of the war, and above on the ceiling was a huge American flag that. So as the injured be brought in on gurneys or the stretchers, the litters, that's the first thing they saw when they got off the helicopter. They knew they were safe.
Glad to be home.
Yeah, glad to be home. And so then they'd be brought in, and 20, 30 people immediately just descend upon them, and the chaplain would be right there.
Sure.
So it was tough.
Must have been awfully tough also, just along those same lines. The story is that when one falls in combat, back home, a chaplain is usually on duty to come and talk to the people,
Mm-hmm.
relatives and the family. That must have been difficult.
Yeah, several times, you just think back to Iraq. Oftentimes, because we were the only hospital in the whole region, and the medical facilities for the local Iraqis were just pitiful, and a lot of times non-existent, and but there would be a lot of accidents. There would be mishaps and injuries, and a lot of bad stuff that would happen to the local civilians, and so they would oftentimes, especially with their kids, bring them in their arms up to the entry control points, and the guards would have to, turn them away, and the kind of the rule of thumb was, would we, how can you do this, turn these people away when they need medical care, but unless it was life, limb, or eyesight, we'd just have to turn them away. But I remember, for some reason, there'd be accidents and car crashes, and so immediately they would bring these people, just drag them with whatever they could muster up, or just carrying little kids in their arms. And I remember this little girl was brought in, and the security guards, these are 19, 20-year-old kids, and they brought it in on a Humvee, and didn't know if it was dead or alive, and they had brought, it was, I think, a cousin. And he was just so distraught, and they couldn't get a hold of the parents, and so I sat with them for quite a while until the doctors came out and told us what they had found, and I just remember just sitting there, and he just kept grabbing my hand, and he just wanted that assurance, and you couldn't talk to him because, but he would say, all is great, all is great, all is great, all is well, all is well. And then he would touch my cross. And even though he was of a different faith, he knew that meant something. And
Absolutely amazing. But your service was certainly well worth the time for the people that you ministered to.
mm-hmm.
Your proudest moment, I understand, had something to do with seeing your family, of course.
Oh yeah,
with the welcome home
yeah,
sign.
coming home, yeah.
That has
So,
to be a joyous
oh boy,
thing.
to see that welcome home sign, and so proud, so proud.
Well, when you got back here then, you had known about Covenant Village, and you had an opportunity to meet with somebody to come and work here?
Well, I had not heard about it. I started looking when I knew that the orders would be coming to an end, and the military in general was downsizing, and the likelihood of extending our resiliency project was probably next to nil. It was recommended, we all start looking for civilian jobs or whatever, and particularly as reservists are the first ones to let go, and so I'd applied at a number of different places, but as you get older in life, and sometimes that's not as employable as the younger, but I just sensed that God, still wasn't through with me yet, and so I'd kept up with a former boss of mine, and talked to him in a while, and he called me. He says he had just gotten a position as the executive director at Covenant Village. And I said, Covenant Village? I said, I used to work for Covenant Retirement Communities up in Seattle, and he says, yeah. He says, it's really a great organization. I said, well, I know probably half the people over there and stuff, and he called me back a couple weeks later, and he said, asked me if I'd be interested in a position. They had an opening. He says, you'd be eligible to apply for it and interview. And so I interviewed with a number of different people and whatnot, and finally was offered the position. And I couldn't have been more happy to come across this position, work in an environment that's very familiar for me, and still feel a sense of calling and ministry and what I do. So
Your duties here include what?
my job title is Resident Services Director, and it has to do with everything from overseeing transportation, receptionist, all the activity programming, and just problem solving, but implementing primarily the what's called the Life Connect program philosophy of care, and that has to do with providing the fullest a range of activities and life-enriching programs for our residents.
Are you still living in Nevada?
I actually live in South Lakewood, so that's our home down there. So.
And you have 3 children?
Three children, and all grown now.
Who was the last one? When were...
Our youngest daughter is Katrina, and this is her second year teaching language development and English as a second language in the Harrison School District in Colorado Springs.
Where did she train? Where did she get
She went to my alma mater, University of Northern Colorado in Greeley, and it's known for its educational program and majors, and so she did very well there, and was offered a position 2 years ago.
Where does she live?
She lives down in Colorado Springs, just on the west side of town, and she loves it, and she just really feels God's call in terms of her ability to work with some very hard situations in a difficult part of town, and so we're very proud of all 3 of our kids and grandkids, and another one on the way, another grandchild on the way.
How many
So
grandchildren do you have?
we have 2. Grace is the daughter of Andrea and Scott, and then Landon is our son, and his wife's they're a little boy. So
How old is Grace and how old is Landon?
Grace is two and a half, and Landon's about 1.5. So and then another one on the way. So
coming.
be born in April.
How exciting.
Another couple months.
What kind of activities, leisure activities, do you and Lynn enjoy these days?
You know, we enjoy just being outdoors and just going for walks and getting up in the mountains whenever we can on picnics and whatnot. But our biggest joy is just to be together as a family, and I see that. You know, the remainder of our life is just being wherever our kids are at and whatever needs they have, and just family is just so important to us, and I'd give everything else up, but just being with the kids, whatever they're doing. So,
Colonel, tell me something or anything about yourself that perhaps nobody else knows.
I think I'm pretty transparent. I'm not sure if there's anything anyone doesn't know about me, but I guess what's most sacred and important is my faith in Jesus Christ, and always willing to share that, and my love for my wife, kids, grandkids. That's who I am. That's who I am.
I like to end the most interviews with this statement and question. What would you advise young people today who are growing up in our lives in this country under these circumstances? What is important for them to know, to do, and just as important, what is there that you would suggest they should be aware of? Pitfalls.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to the young people?
We live in an evil world, unfortunately, and sin prevails, and it's difficult to navigate that sometimes, and sometimes people don't want to talk about it or come from a different perspective or frame of reference on life and their worldview. But I've seen the ugliness of life and the depravity of sin and the darkest of hearts, and how evil the world is out there. And I think young people, all people, have to be conscious of that, or come to some awareness or recognition of that. And as you look at the true root cause of why there's war and hatred and strife and ugliness in this life, it goes back to a very demonic and sin-ridden world. But praise God, we have a God that loves us so much. And that's what I want people to know and to feel and to understand, that it's only in the person of Jesus Christ, and to know Him as Lord and Savior. It's that relationship that makes all the difference in the world. Because as the Bible says, the wage of sin is death. When we see death and we see the anger and the killings and the war out there, and you know, that's a result of sin. But praise God, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. It's in Christ that there's life, and that's the direction we have to go. It may not be the most popular thing. It may not be the worldview that the modernism likes to hear and talk about. Because we are accountable to a righteous and holy God. We're accountable to one who tells us there is a right and there is a wrong. There is truth and there's falsehood. And so for young people, for all people, to know the truth, it's the truth that sets us free and gives us the victory in the end. because there is life after this life. There's life, and now's the time to choose. Now's the time to make sure that then when we pass from this life, that others know what we stand for, and that to claim victory in Jesus Christ, to know that in Him there is life, there's hope, there's peace and forgiveness. That is the most important message. That's what's eternal. That's what will endure past the good times, the bad times, and that's what I claim, my hope in Jesus Christ.
Well, Colonel Meister, I want to thank you for your service to our country, first of all. And also thank you very much for sharing with us this afternoon. It's been very nice, and I appreciate you taking the time out from your busy schedule and giving us your opinion and your ideas as to what has gone on in your own life. Thank you very much.
It's been an honor. Thank you.